In this edition of SmartBites, the first of the two-part series on interesting ideas to leapfrogging QA, Tathagat Varma outlines what is the Super Organism Mindset. He's currently the country head of NerdWallet, a thought leader, a mentor, and also an author. In one of your talks, you outlined an interesting idea, the Super Organism Mindset. Enlighten us about it, Tathagat.
So Superorganism Mindset is a very interesting concept. When I came across that, I was like, wow, this is something that totally blows your mind. So the whole idea is very simple. A group of organisms comes together and they behave as if they were a large version, not a miniature version, but a larger version of the same organism. We have seen that a lot in some kind of insects known as eusocial insects. They basically care for each other, like insects and termites and ants, for example. So ants, for example, is a great example of that, where a few ants by themselves are very powerless actually, if you think of it. If you leave a few dozen ants on the table, they will keep circling and then they will die because they will not be able to figure out. But you put 500,000 ants and they will probably be able to finish off a horse also. They can eat up the whole horse, for example, right? That kind of a thing there. How do they do that? They really behave in true sense. There is nobody centrally controlling them. There is nobody really telling them, but they behave like a full thing. So if you look at ants, for example, and let's say there's an army of ants that is marching, and they are going on a tree branch, and they find a crack in the tree branch. Now there is no way they can get to the other side of it. What do? They instantly start forming some kind of a bridge over the broken branch, and they are willing to put their individual interest on the back burner in the interest of the community interest, and then they solve the problem. Nobody is telling them. So if you see a video, there are a lot of videos of that. You watch them, you say, okay, suddenly they start making a ant bridge, and then rest of the ants go over that, and then after every ant is gone, they dismantle it and they keep going there. And that is the whole idea of a superorganism. It actually is a collective way in which the organisms are coming together and they are behaving. To an outsider, it is actually looking as if it's a one single giant organism which is still behaving like one ant, for example, because biologically it's still the same thing. But then what really makes it happen in the absence of a centralized control, a centralized leader, that all these millions of autonomous agents decide to come together. The behavior that they exhibit is something that we call as emergent behavior, because individually they are not doing a lot of that stuff there, but when they come together they exhibit an emergent behavior there, right? So in some sense I would call, for example, our neurons also as a superorganism. An individual, so let's take the case of human emotions, right? Anger or love or friendship. Now at a brain level, we can understand, we are saying, okay, when something happens, it triggers some kind of a hormonal response into me. But if you take 10 neurons out of my brain and you say, I want to see where is love in these neurons, you won't be able to figure it out. But when you put 10 billion of them, you are able to see all kind of human emotions being responded to, right? So there is something that is an emergent property which is very different from the Western philosophical thinking of reductionism. We cannot explain that with the Descartes reductionism method, but it is basically sum of parts is greater than the parts itself, and that is the whole idea of superorganism. Now when it comes to human beings, we see some of the things. For example, if you would have seen the dahi handi kind of a thing, the human pyramid in Mumbai, that's a superorganism. It behaves like one single human being where all of them are coming together for a common cause. So my interest area is to really understand how can we form some of those superorganisms in our teams and organizations, and because that is really the most cohesive way in which the human beings can come together and we can build very high performing teams. So that was the whole talk about what it is.
Is that similar to the military personnel marching in line to a tune, behaving as one unit?
Because it's like you have everybody is marching on the same beat, everybody is aligned to the same thing. But then if you think of it, I would make a subtle distinction here, because somebody is externally kind of setting the clock frequency, right? Whereas if you take in nature, for example, the ants or the termites coming together, there's nobody who's setting the clock speed for them, but they are deciding to come together. One of the examples that we talk about is the fireflies. We all remember fireflies from our childhood days. If you take like hundreds of fireflies, you see a very strange behavior. When they start flashing their lights, they are all doing asynchronously in a very random manner. But then within literally seconds, it's a very magical thing. If you watch a video, that literally within seconds they all started flashing at the same time. Now that's a very interesting behavior, because the theories about Firefly flashing the light is, one, maybe it is trying to light up so that they can look at the termites and then they can eat them. But then the question comes, then why they would all do together, because the chances of an individual firefly getting the individual food is lesser in a group. So it is in some sense the same kind of a eusocial behavior, where you are putting your own interest on the back burner, but you are putting the interest of the community ahead of you. The second theory says that they are actually attracting the mates, they are attracting the females for that. They are again the same question. But then again the key thing is that actually by behaving like a one giant firefly, they actually attract more number of mates, they attract more number of prey than they would be able to do individually.
Open source movement and development has provided significant leverage to the development community. Continuing on the super organism mindset, how can the QA community collaborate far better and leverage far more than what we do today?
I think I'll take the metaphor of how a superorganism can be there in a team to begin with. For example, mob programming is to me a great metaphor that comes to my mind, where everybody is kind of crowdsourcing in some sense the ideas and working on a common problem, and everybody is coming together. Where I think it's to me it's a canonical form of open source, where people are coming, people are all together, and they are doing. Somebody might have an idea. It's not about my assigned role, but I can do that. So I can do that. So I think as a QA, if I see myself as a part of that superorganism, rather than saying I am a QA professional, but I'm saying I am part of this mob that is really building the feature. I think that's the kind of a thing I would look at it, where an individual capability is a value addition to the team, but it does not have to stand out and say that, hey, I was the person who found 5 bugs on that, right? Because it's like, how many software do you actually know where you know the name of people who wrote the line of code there? We don't know that, right? So why should it be that QA should be any different there? I think what is important is to understand is, in my mind, QA is a role that is playing a first class role in creating a valuable software, in shipping a valuable software rather. So sometimes it might be that it is a UI heavy, sometimes it is database heavy, sometimes it's backend heavy, sometimes it's more qualification heavy, but together the customer doesn't really care. Customer says, are you solving my problem? Can you do it well? And in my view, if there is a QA person, the QA person is actually the customer on your team. That's how I have always seen that. That person is the one who is really going to have the empathy for the customer. So if I can have the empathy, I'm going to be able to do the maximum kind of a work there. So now if I see from how a superorganism, or if we say the open source kind of a thinking there, the way I see that is it is so I mean, we have a lot of software in the public domain, for example. Instead of taking the approach that I'm only going to work against some specific kind of a software, some specific kind of a specification, if I take it as a mindset where saying, hey, we are a community of people, which is basically we have self-appointed a charter where we are saying that, okay, I think these systems should work well because these are important for the humanity, or these are important for the customers. And I have basically crowdsourced tools. I have basically crowdsourced a lot of ideas there to make them, to monitor them, for example, or make sure that they work together. And I'm seeing that it is not really important about, like in a true open source or a Wikipedia way, it's not important who actually gave that thing. It is the sum that is greater than the parts kind of a thinking there. So to me, I would like to apply the same metaphor into solving some other problem. For example, I might be able to look at a scenario where, just based on the Google results or just based on the tweets coming there, I might be able to, there are studies that have been done which are able to find, for example, there is a prevalence of flu in this area because a lot of people are generating the queries from there. So in a true sense, it's the same kind of a thinking where people are basically crowdsourcing from there and you are stitching it all together. I think QA might be able to bring some of those kind of a things where, based on what kind of queries people are doing, we know what kind of problems people are facing there. So I might be running the world's biggest travel site. Now I might be able to think of, hey, instead of one is qualifying the software in the lab, Second is, how do I qualify, how do I really monitor how people are doing it? So maybe I create some kind of a tools where all I'm doing is I'm really based on how the geotagging of my customers who are coming to my website, I'm able to see what are the hotspots there even before a bug is filed there. I think that mindset could be a great mindset in really preventing a lot of problems before they become critical there. And then if I can bring some of the machine learning there, because I'm able to correlate with the events in the past, I know that, hey, this is going critical now, and it's very likely that in the next 4 weeks we have a 60% chances of an outage happening there. That to me would be taking the whole art and craft of QA to the next level, where I'm really bringing a lot of these open source kind of ideas where we are pooling in individual things, we're building a lot of tools, we're bringing the ideas from a super organism where instead of one person really testing a particular thing, we are really testing how the community at large is, like you have a million people who are using it every week, and how do they kind of do, what kind of a traffic pattern does it create there. That maybe some companies already have tools for that, for example, but then this is a kind of a thinking that could go there. So I may not have a specific example, but this is how I would use some of that thinking to kind of build this together.